Hello everyone, welcome back to the second episode of Squad Review. First of all, thank you to you all for submitting. The response from the first episode and after the first episode, in terms of the amount of submission I've been getting, is so positive. So thank you for that. And the overall feeling is getting better. We're starting to see more interesting squads and less of the usual boring meta. So without further ado, let's get into it because we have a lot of submissions to get through today. So first one up, we have Arafatur Rahman Irfan. Sorry if I'm butchering your name here, but we have a very decent free-to-play squad here, using a 4-4-2 formation and long ball counter. Nothing to fault about the formation here really. You have a decent selection of players here, but it looks like you're a relatively new player. If I were to pick an area to improve on, I would say a replacement centre forward to pair with Mbappe. Perhaps someone with some more physical presence that could provide an alternative style to your attack. I very much like the CB pairing here. One CB with decent pace and the other with the height advantage to deal with aerial threats. I personally am a big fan of that Mendieta card as well, and I should definitely use him more than I do now. Lastly, the only criticism is that you use auto allocation for all your players. I would suggest trying to build players to your playstyle to get the most out of them. Overall, I would rate this a B. Next up, we have JC1023. He says, I usually play with a quick counter and sometimes struggle in building up plays. This is a topic that I want to touch on briefly. I believe that the counter styles sometimes force you to rush your decisions, to the point you see a player running and you think you have to send a through ball, or because everyone's running forward as soon as you get the ball, you sometimes lack good options for a forward pass. And I think that's what's happening here. To that I would say the best way to practice is just to keep doing it. Try a possession for a while and I think you'll learn a lot. Or you can subscribe and wait for my possession guide, which will be in the works. Okay, let's talk about the squad now. The first impression I get with this is it lacks physicality, especially in the CF and DMF area. Mind you, I do like to use agile players, but since this update is so physically focused, you do need an option or two just to balance it out. Personally, I don't think this Messi is a good option for the main striker. Unless you're going for a more false 9 style, then it might be okay. I wouldn't use Kante as the lone DMF though, as he lacks height. Your other option is David, who is the same height, so again, he's not that suitable either. And for the defensive setup, I would personally swap Koundé and Costa Curta. But yeah, overall a very nimble focused squad. With a bit of physical reinforcement, this could be a very strong squad. I'll give this a B+. For squad number 3 we have Josko, rocking a 3-4-3 formation with out wide play style, something we don't see very often. I don't really have much to pick on about the attack with your squad, but defensively I'm a little bit concerned. Normally with 3 at the back, you'd want your wingers to have a bit of defensive capabilities, because they are the only ones on the side and will be required to go up and down the wings to attack and defend. Normally this might not be much of a problem if you had traditional DMFs to cover the space, but here you have Zaire Emery and Gravenberch, both trained as CMFs by the look of it, so they won't be that good defensively. Last thing is your 3 CBs. Personally, I would put the slowest defender in the middle, in this case would be Dan Burn, because your side CBs would be the ones running out to the wings to cover the space left by your wingers. Also, I personally prefer to put the tallest defender in the middle to deal with crosses. Lastly, if you're finding yourself a little bit vulnerable on the transition, I would suggest moving Griezmann and Platini down to AMF so you have more control in the midfield. Currently, as it stands, your 3 forwards will not come back to help with defending. I'm giving this a solid B. Next up, we have Desi Samba, and this is an absolute eyesore. Your forwards must be feeling very claustrophobic with all of them being so close together. Not to mention your defenders and goalkeeper as well. Speaking of defenders, why do you have Alba and Costa Curta playing as CBs? Not least when they're trained as fullbacks. Please do tell me why you've decided to move the players like this. What advantage do you get out of it? I personally would put Platini down a little bit to AMF to provide a little bit more options in midfield. But judging by how you set up your formation, it's very clear how you play, so maybe that's why you've set up your forwards like this. Lastly, you use auto-allocate to train all your players, so that's points deducted as well. Overall, this is a poor D from me. Guys, in the future when I get a lot of submissions and I have to get selective with them, if I see auto-training then I might have to skip them. Hopefully this will force some of you to learn to train your players. Next up, we have Ame Hirashi with the 4-3-3. I hope you realize that you can put your players outside of their registered positions, because that's the only explanation I could come up with this slightly wonky formation. Maybe you just want to utilize your players' playstyles, but I don't think it's worth changing formation just for that. Personally, I would use Wirtz at AMF and Kvaratskhelia at left wing forward, or if you want to utilize the whole player playstyle, then something like this could also work. Other than that, I'm liking the selection of players here. That Pirlo is absolutely goated, and I like using DiMarco a lot personally. I hope you put counter target on Di Maria, or have a backup option, as his stamina is not great. I'm giving this a B+. Next up, we have Olympus. He says, my CMF, AMF and CF seems to be my weak links. Do you think the next Brazil epics coming will solve my issues for the CF and AMF? First of all, no. You have a good squad already, and if that doesn't work for you, then opening a new pack won't solve the issue. Especially if you're saying Villa lacks physicality, but then you want to spin for Romario? Sure, getting these super overpowered epic cards will help, but it won't solve the issue. And judging by your comments and your squad, my main concern is that you're a little bit obsessed with epic cards and legends. I know you have other cards on the bench, but it seems like you just put all the fanciest cards with the highest number in your team and call it a day. Just because it's an epic card with a higher overall number doesn't necessarily mean it's better than a player of the week card, for example. Take a look at my squad. I change my squad every week depending on form update. Even though I have enough epic cards to make a whole team out of them, I don't do that because those players might not fit my style. Unfortunately, you haven't shown me your reserves, so I can't make any suggestions. But judging by that Iniesta, it seems like you have been playing this game for long enough, so I would definitely explore the other cards that you have and not be bound by the idea of, oh, I have to use all my epic cards. Other than that, a small thing I would personally change in regards of what you said about Xabi Alonso being slow. I wouldn't use two defensive midfielders that sit back during attack. You have Vieira, who's very defensive, and Xabi Alonso, who is an orchestrator, so he will sit behind during attacks. I would personally swap Alonso with a slightly more attacking-minded CMF. Perhaps one is a little bit more agile too, compared to your other options like Beckham. Players like Modric, Gundogan, Barella would be a perfect fit to provide a little bit more balance between attack and defense. I'll give this an A-. Squad 7, we have Sam Sins 04. He says, I think wing play is like playing with a handicap. Well, that would explain the wide SS players. Personally, I don't agree with that statement. It is only a handicap if you don't know how to use your space to create. Sure, it's not the meta like some people here think I'm claiming on my channel, but proper wing play can open up way more possibilities than just 1-2 spam through the middle. I'm not quite sure if this Saka is a good option as an AMF, given that his low pass is not that great, and as an AMF, his lofter pass stat would be a bit wasted. I would personally swap Saka and Messi. The last thing is, I'm not sure if there's a need to put offensive instruction on both of your fullbacks. For Belletti at least, he's an offensive fullback, and they normally join the attack anyway, unless you want both of them to attack and not defend, in which case I don't understand it either. Overall, a decent free-to-play squad. Personally, I would have a second DMF who's slightly more creative. Not both DMFs need to be very defensively minded. And I hope you have a backup CB as well, as an alternative to Costa Curta to deal with any potential aerial threats. Overall, a C+. Next up, we have DRB Messi 10. He says, I often use 4-2-2-2 with 2 AMFs and fullbacks with defensive. Don't we all know what this is about? But sometimes he tries to use this. First of all, the most glaring thing is you use auto training, so please don't do that. Secondly, while this formation is very balanced in attack, during defense your midfield will feel very open, especially if you have wide midfielders who are not remotely good at defending. Personally, I would move Kimmich down a little bit as a CMF or DMF. I don't think he's well suited for an AMF role, not at least when you build him as a CMF anyway. His offensive awareness is too low for that position. Another small thing is, I would swap your CBs around. Have the left footed CB on the left and right footed CB on the right. Maybe that's just an OCD thing. Overall, if you keep this formation, then at least use wingers that are a little bit more balanced with attack and defense. Otherwise, I would look at dropping Kimmich down, like I said, or go a step beyond and turn it into a 4-5-1. But other than that, I like your selection here. I can definitely get by that. Just don't use auto training, please. This is a solid B. Last but not least, we have Jimbo Slice with a massive paragraph of comments that I won't read all of it. But he said he's finished in the top 100 before using these tactics. And best finish recently in the last 6 months has been 189. So I'm curious what kind of tactics you play prior to the last 6 months then. I hope it's not something that I don't want to hear. But anyway, looking at this squad, I mean, it looks very good. The only small things I would pick on is I would personally swap Gullit and Messi. Having Messi on the right side would open up a bigger angle for you to shoot and curl the shots as well. And same of course with Gullit on the left side. The other thing is, if you're playing possession, then I would strongly recommend not using 2 defensive fullbacks. The whole point of playing possession is you have overlapping fullbacks to make runs behind the winger and distract your opponent's defenders. So having 2 defensive fullbacks who will stay behind for the majority of the game does not really fit that style of play. He does have a sub-tactic, which is a 3-2-2-3 formation. He said this is inspired by Guardiola's treble-winning City side, which I can definitely get by. Personally, I have tried this formation as well and it's good, nothing wrong with that. Again, just swap Messi and Gullit and you have an almost perfect lineup. So for this, I'm giving an A. So that's all I have time for today. Again, massive thank you to you all for submitting your squads to me. If your submission didn't quite make it into the video, then it will probably be featured in the next one. Once again, if you want to submit your squads for me to review, then do use the link in the description. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you in the next one.